On behalf of all of us here in the sanctuary of Eastminster United Church in Belleville, Ontario, welcome to those who are finding us on the internet or on your television screen through our DVD ministry. This is our service for December 18, 2011, our Christmas Sunday service. And we're going to think about the truth about Christmas. Pray with me. Grant, O God, that as we spend this little while reflecting on words of ancient text, we will hear in them whatever new word you would speak to us today. Amen. Matthew's version of the Nativity narrative, especially the part about the Magi, gives us in sharp focus the bad news, good news contradictions of the first Christmas. The wise and royal travelers from the East recognized in Mary's baby the fulfillment of ancient promise and the birth of new hope for all of humankind. When they saw that the star had stopped over the place where the child was, they were overwhelmed with joy. King Herod's reaction was one of history's most horrific instances of self-serving wickedness, unspeakable in its cruelty, the slaughter of children in order to eliminate the one who might be a threat to his throne. Well, here in the beauty of this sanctuary, filled with echoes, beautiful echoes of seasonal melodies, it's easy to feel the good news dimension of Christmas. Even today, however, there is another dimension of Christmas, which is also true. According to physicians, psychologists, family counselors, and many accountants, Christmas can be a very hard time. Not even Santa Claus is spared the nasty risks of the Yuletide season. I have in my hand a copy of a letter recently sent to Santa by a concerned fan. Dear Santa, we're worried about you. From your rosy red cheeks to your legendary girth to your all-night sleigh ride around the world, you may be at risk of diseases, maladies, mishaps, and lawsuits that send chills through our Santa-loving hearts. A careful examination of what we know about you and your lifestyle raises troubling signs. Obesity. Frankly, Santa, this may be your biggest area of concern. Studies show that overweight men have more than double the average risk of heart attacks, increases the risk of other diseases. We've seen the pictures, we've noticed you in the malls, and we've heard that your tummy shakes like a bowl full of jelly when you chuckle. On this, we'll take part of the blame. All these years we've set out milk and cookies on Christmas Eve. Maybe it's time for Mrs. Claus to get you a Nordic track or a Thigh Master. But be sure to consult your physician before undertaking an exercise regimen. Pipe smoking. You have been pictured with a pipe, and a witness who encountered you in his home said the smoke encircled his head like a wreath. According to the Canadian Cancer Society, pipe and cigar smokers have twice a non-smoker's risk of lung cancer, 4 times the risk of larynx cancer, 2 to 3 times the risk of cancers of the mouth and esophagus. And stress. Dealing with Christmas wishes from millions of kiddies could certainly put one of the most on the emotional hot seat. And anxiety can surpass even smoking as a risk for certain heart problems. On this point, though, we do have some good news. Medical journals report that laughter, as evidenced by your trademark ho, 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 is one of the best stress busters going. Soot. Now, we admire your ability to slip up and down the average chimney, an opening about 30 centimeters by 40 centimeters, but creosote flakes on the chimney walls are toxic and can lead to respiratory problems. Dear mites, close, continuous contact with your trusty reindeer means that if they get mites, so might you. Watch out for itchy rashes and keep the deer out of your bed. Dementia. We understand that when you make a list, you check it twice. Is this an early sign of memory loss? Viral infections. A young witness saw you kissing Mummy underneath the mistletoe last night. You realize, of course, that this is the cold and flu season. And sleigh accidents. We've seen many pictures of you in that sleigh, but never with your seatbelt on. We'd sure hate to see you get hurt. Sincerely, a concerned friend. The truth about Christmas is that even for Santa Claus, it can be very difficult. But there is much more that is true about Christmas, much truth that does not depend on the many trappings of the season, or whether school bus drivers get to put up decorations on their buses, or whether greeting cards say Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays. This too is the truth about Christmas. The truth about Christmas is that it contradicts all our experience. Experience has persuaded many of us that we are ultimately alone. Loved ones leave home or they die and friends go their way. Experience teaches us that we've got to look out for ourselves because nobody else will. Experience convinces us that we have to keep getting better despite the fact that we know we're never going to be good enough. But here is a truth that contradicts our experience. The birth of Mary's baby was the arrival of God, more intimate than conception, as incredible as the most fantastic extraterrestrial encounter. And now, with God in our world, since the arrival of the divine visitor who refuses to go home, we can never be alone. And while experience argues self-sufficiency, the child who is God asks to be trusted. And while the carrot of worthiness seems to be always a little out of reach, Christmas proves that God already loves us without condition, only invitation. A few years ago, Oprah Winfrey delivered the commencement address at Salem College in North Carolina, College for Women. And this is part of her speech. There is a sacred calling on your life, she said, and the question is, will you spend your life flittering and fluttering about, or take the time and really heed that call and create your own path to your highest good? Real power is when you're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing, the best that can be done. There is a surge, there's a kind of energy that says, I'm in my groove, and nobody has to tell you, you go, girl, because you know you're already gone. When you dare to believe the truth about Mary's child, you realize that there really is such a sacred calling on your life. And you know that the one who calls you is also with you and offering to provide the courage, the strength, the resources, even the opportunities that you need to do what you're supposed to be doing the best it can be done. You see, the truth about Christmas contradicts all of our dispiriting assumptions and discouraging experiences by revealing to us that by the grace of God, the best we can be is not only possible, it's wonderful. It's also true that Christmas cancels our excuses. According to the Reuters news service, the transport authority in Paris, France, the people who run the metro, use 1.5 tons of perfume every month to cover the unpleasant odors in the city's subway system. They use a scent called Madeleine, which is described as a smell that is sweet rather than violent, that lingers for up to 2 weeks, and that suggests a feeling of cleanliness and well-being rather than the filthiness that's being covered up. Now, here's an obvious question. Why don't they just clean up the subway so they don't have the bad smell to begin with? If I'm honest, I confess to using my own version of Madeleine. I'm not talking about the fragrances of Brut, Polo, or Gillette, or the unscented stuff applied to the private places that sometimes smell. I'm talking about a stink that's even worse. I'm talking about the truth about me, the truth you don't know and I don't want to tell you. So I cover it up with the sickly sweetness of excuses. I didn't know any better. I couldn't help myself. Now, I might get away with the cover-up perfume of self-justification, except for Christmas. Except that the child born in Bethlehem brought a new era of Emmanuel. God is with us now, and the help of God is always ours for the taking. I can no longer argue that less than my best is good enough, because now my potential has been increased to include whatever can be done by God and me together. And I can't say that yesterday's failure prevents today's attempt, because having the help of God guarantees a new beginning every day. And I cannot use yesterday's sorrow to beg off of life or love, because the promises of God demand unrelenting hope. The truth is, Christmas cancels our excuses. Someone has said that if you don't change today, your tomorrows will be the same as your yesterdays. Losing our excuses is wonderful. It's an empowering thing if it reduces the temptation to be satisfied with what has been. When Christmas cancels our excuses, we get the freedom to choose. Leo Buscaglia put it this way: you have a choice. You can select joy over despair. You can select happiness over tears. You can select action over apathy. You can select growth over stagnation. And you can select life. It's time that people tell you that you are not at the mercy of forces greater than yourself. Christmas introduces us to the child who is God with us, a force far greater than any other, a force that cancels our excuses, so we get the freedom to choose. And according to everything we believe, this too is true. Christmas raises our expectations. Although his 19th century experience was very different from ours, without most of the circumstances and devices which are probably the cause of the worst of our stress, Henry Ward Beecher wrote with a wisdom that anticipated the challenges of this future age. He wrote, "It's not work that kills people. It's worry. Work is healthy. You can hardly put more on a person than he can bear. But worry is rust on the blade. It's not the revolution that destroys the machinery, it's the friction. Fear secretes acids, but love and trust are sweet juices." See, the extent of our anxiety depends in part on what happens to us, but it's also a function of what we expect. If, when trouble comes, we expect to be helpless victims of circumstance, or worse, pawns of some uncaring fate, then we better worry. But if, on the other hand, we expect the trouble to pass, and we expect in the meantime a helper to see us through, then the acid of anxiety is replaced by the sweet juices of love and trust. It all depends on what you expect. Patrick Overton wrote like a man whose expectations were very high indeed. I love this. He said, when you come to the edge of all the light you have, and you got to take a step into the darkness of the unknown, then you can believe that one of two things is going to happen. Either there will be something solid for you to stand on, or you're going to be taught how to fly. The quality, even the meaning of life for us depends so much on what we expect. Let me end with a little story in verse. It's about two very different people and the power of their expectations. Some scoundrel stole the Christ child from the manger on the lawn. And the preacher, when he came to church, was first to find it gone. And he told the people angrily that Jesus had been took. And he said his faith in humankind had terribly been shook. The service done, the cleric left, the ache still in his heart, and met young Tommy in the street, enjoying his new cart. So happy did the child appear, it made him feel less sad. But what he saw inside the cart was worse than even bad. "'Twas you who stole the Christ child. What a wicked thing to do." "But Pastor, sir," said Tommy, "I thought everyone knew. I prayed to Jesus for this gift." And he touched the cart with pride. "And I promised, if I got it, I'd give him the first ride." You see, as it turned out, the preacher who expected the worst was dead wrong. The missing baby was not proof of wickedness. It was a symbol of grace. And the child who expected to feel the presence of Christ actually did, because for him the doll was the baby Jesus. There are, God knows, there are many unhappy things which can be true about Christmas. It can empty our wallets. It might leave our waistlines bulging. It is possible for the fuss and bother to leave us stressed and wishing it was over. But the truth about Christmas has nothing to do with credit cards or calories. With the joy of God arriving, Christmas contradicts our experience. With the power of God forgiving, Christmas cancels our excuses. And with the hope of God remaining, Christmas raises our expectations. May the truth, the real truth about Christmas that is always true, make your Christmas truly the best that Christmas can be. Amen.